So if you are watching the broadcast, welcome to the 14th Annual Joint Canadian Institute of Transportation Engineers Student Presentation Competition in its second year in this online forum. My name is Sean Nix. I'm Associate Dean at Mohawk College in Hamilton, and pleased to present to you 3 undergraduate, 3 graduate presentations for this competition. So each presenter is going to have I believe the rules are up to 15 minutes, and I will give a bit of a timekeeper note here. What I will do is I will encourage everyone to keep their cameras off during each of the respective presentations. I will briefly appear with my camera just to give you a 2-minute warning, and then I'll disappear again, and I'll just let you do your thing. And then at the end, if you are over, we'll just make sure that that's noted as a time penalty, and I'll just announce that to the judges. In the audience, we have the 3 coordinators who received your presentations, your abstracts, and who will also be serving as judges today. So we have Dana Elfar representing Southwestern Ontario, we have Eric Nevlin representing Toronto, and we have Omar Shams representing the Hamilton section. So, like every year, we start with the undergraduate category, and so I'm going to ask Avery DeChee from Western University to start with her presentation. So I'll ask everyone else to turn their cameras off. Avery, if you can share your screen and just let me know when you're ready, and I'll begin with the clock.
All right. Okay, I should be good. So, hi everyone. All right. Hi, my name is Avery DeChee. I'm a 4th-year structural civil engineering student at Western University, and my student abstract was about the high-performance road surfaces. So, as transportation engineers design and develop new communities, there are common goals for each project. Ideally, we want communities to be smart, sustainable, healthy, strategic, and collaborative. All of these goals are important in order to develop a well-rounded community. I decided for the abstract to focus in on one of the goals, and it was sustainable development. Sustainable development is a leading motivator of researchers worldwide. It is challenging every industry to think creatively and question the status quo. Sustainable development is of the utmost importance from a legislative and environmental perspective. Therefore, making sustainable development the fundamental goal of every modern infrastructure project. For me, the most logical place to confirm this community goal and begin brainstorming is turning to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Goal 11 is a direct correlation to the goals of transportation engineers. Goal 11 states to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. This allowed me to start thinking about the communities I've lived in and begin to question if it meets this goal. I've spent the past 5 years living in London, attending Western University, and I have become familiar with the Sifton West 5 development in London. The West 5 development aims to be Ontario's most sustainable community, and in the process is energizing the industry. The West 5 development has led a lot of my research and the fundamental inspiration for my abstract. West 5 states that a community is sustainable if it is modern, progressive, smart, healthy, and better. The West 5 community has a focus on urban design and sustainability. After researching their website, West 5 stated that for urban design, they mentioned things like architectural overhangs that permit sunlight but not rain, bicycle storage inside of office buildings, contemporary street furniture, and winterized main streets. This winterized Main Street option really piqued my attention, as I've been driving for many years now and each winter is a headache. But there were no further details about this goal, so it required me to complete some personal reflection. What would I want from a winterized Main Street? What are my current challenges with driving in the winter? I recognized that streets are icy and snow-covered, which provide dangerous driving conditions. The lanes often appear to be narrower due to standing snow and snow storage, and the streets are wet and slushy, which is unenjoyable for active transportation users. I then asked myself, how can these challenges be improved? What if we could answer our problem from the root? We need to start from the ground up, and with my structural engineering and material knowledge, I wanted to consider the pavement. The use of high-performance road surfaces could be immensely effective at achieving this goal. These road surfaces will allow the snow and ice to melt faster due to the mechanical properties present within the paving surface. An example of a high-performance road surface that I studied is a porous asphalt with large aggregates. The benefits of this pavement are that the large pores allow the subgrade warmth to rise to the surface. It creates a naturally frictional surface and aids in drainage and stormwater management. Considering a porous pavement, I completed a reflection on the benefits for road geometry for transportation engineers. Utilizing a high-performance road surface will result in smaller volume of snow accumulated on the streets. This results in reduced snow storage requirements. The reduction of snow storage requirements will minimize the shoulder and boulevard widths, providing more flexibility within the road geometry. This results in innovative city designs, safer streets, and increased construction of complete streets. Building on complete streets, I understand that there are many manuals and guides that have similar concepts. However, I have referred to the London Complete Streets Design Manual as it is the one I'm most familiar with. The City of London has detailed an action plan to construct complete streets within the municipality in order to effectively meet user needs. Complete streets advance the development of sustainable development as they are designed to minimize environmental impacts and emissions while supporting energy efficiency. However, complete streets are often challenging to implement within existing roadways due to the large required cross-section. With the use of a high-performance road surface, narrower shoulders and boulevards will allow more streets to be retrofitted to the framework of a complete street. In order to understand the large cross-section requirements from the Complete Streets Manual, I did some research on existing conditions within London. I chose two typical street classifications in London, the first being an urban thoroughfare. Completing a brief analysis on urban thoroughfares in London, the streets currently have about an average width of 37 meters. According to the London Complete Streets Manual, this road classification requires a 45-meter width. The next classification was a neighborhood connector. Within London, there were large variations on these streets, but the average is about 15 meters in width. 23 meters of width is required for these streets according to the manual. Both of these classifications require at least 8 more meters in width than what is existing. Using a high-performance road surface can allow the shoulders and boulevards to be minimized. Any savings will be beneficial within the cross-sections to meet the complete street requirements. After my brief analysis, it was confirmed that there is tremendous potential for high-performance road surfaces in London. This design can impact far beyond London and southwestern Ontario, though. Realizing this potential will provide a sustainable future for municipalities both nationally and internationally. Canada's publicly owned two-lane road network stretches over 1 million kilometers, according to a survey on the nation's roads, bridges, and tunnels. 39.9% of those roads are paved. I don't expect the high-performance road surface solution to be implemented everywhere, but that is a lot of roads, a lot of snow, and a lot of potential for these surfaces. I'm excited for the potential of the high-performing road surfaces, including porous pavements. The numbers speak for themselves with the relevancy of the abstract. I would love to see the changes implemented within the industry. High-performance road surfaces is a great strategy for transportation engineers to develop more sustainable communities. I thank you for your time today, and I can now open the floor to any questions or discussions.
Okay, so I believe there's an opportunity to put questions in the chat, and some of those will be sent directly to me to review, and possibly Avery will be able to see them as well. But if anybody has questions, feel free to type them into the chat. It's the joy of teaching any online class or doing any of these online. There's always a bit of a gap in terms of waiting for things to happen. So appreciate your patience. Well, maybe in the interest of keeping this with the context of questions, I'll ask one for you directly live. Um, Complete Streets guidelines. Were you able to use any other guidelines that expanded beyond the scope of Complete Streets? So something that might be a bit more generic from a geometric design point of view, or I'm not sure. Did you look at any other design manuals beyond the scope of Complete Streets?
Yes, so I referenced the MTO design manuals and handbooks as well to see the requirements for the shoulders and boulevards.
Okay, well, seeing no other questions coming in, Avery, I guess I'll let you off the hook. Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for representing Western in this competition. So with that, I'm going to ask Andres Rodriguez from the University of Waterloo to turn on his camera to load up his presentation, and as soon as he's ready to let me know, and I will start the clock.
All right, perfect. Just testing my audio. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear, yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, and is my screen visible right now?
Just waiting for you to load it into presentation mode. So if you just hit the from beginning. Yeah, looks like it's there. It looks like we may just have a couple of minor hiccups during the transition, so just be aware that you might need a few seconds for the slide to load. And yeah, and otherwise, as soon as you let me know, again, same rule will apply. So when there's a 2-minute warning, I'll just kind of flash with my face here, and otherwise, you've got your 15 minutes. So as soon as you're ready, just let me know, and we're good to go.
Okay. All right, so hello, everyone. Thank you for just inviting me. And my name is Andres Valencia. I'm a urban planning student at the University of Waterloo. And today I thought I would share a bit on how community-centered development can really lead to successful public engagement. So in other words, how we can curb NIMBYism by reevaluating the practices in our industry. So some general ideas: timeliness, engagement, some tangible solutions, tangible results. So in the industry of transportation, we oftentimes see public engagement as a hazy, complicated, perhaps undesirable task because of the nature of our careers, right? How we have an extremely technical perspective on a lot of transportation-related issues. Particularly regarding public transportation. So how can we implement these general ideas of the issue at hand and reevaluate what we are doing? So going beyond the technicalities of successful public engagement, the most important part, according to many sources, and it's what I am basically calling for in this presentation, is early beginnings. Underrepresentation of the silent majority and the loudness of the opposition is basically the core of many delays, budget overages, cancellations, and issues in the transportation development process, both from the private sector and the public sector. So two main factors that we need to have as core values to this, to implement proper public engagement. First, we have collaboration, and let's remember first and foremost that we are co-creators. We may have the professional expertise, but at the end of the day, the most important part is that we are building something in favor of the community, whether it's a piece of road infrastructure or transportation, public transportation. So we know communities can be transformed by transit, by connections, by improvement in the connections that they have to their communities. But how do we really help people understand this and grasp this? How can communities really help us develop the projects that we are tasked to do, whether we work for the private or the public field? And how can we really help them understand that it will be valuable for them, how it would fit among their daily living dynamics, and possibly changing their entire living dynamics, particularly regarding public transportation. The second principle is co-education. So what can we teach the community? We can teach the benefits of public transportation, especially in the North American context. But we can also change, teach change in dynamics that it will cause in their community. How lively, livable communities can be extremely linked to proper transportation connections. We can very much as well teach the social infrastructure aspect of transportation, how transportation can really be a catalyst for social change, especially in a lot of our cities' most neglected or most heavily socially impacted neighborhoods. But the most important question is, what must we learn? Well, in the basics, we can learn the neighborhood character, we can learn the history, particularly with, for example, racial enclaves, for example, like Chinatown. But also we can learn who their vulnerable populations are, what the potential of the community really is. Experience the community to really see how our job can really be done more in favor of the community rather to meet a technical requirement. So let's cater our expertise to the aspects of the community. One big aspect of the issue at hand is mistrust and unfamiliarity. So for a long period, we have known about NIMBYism. It's something that rose to prominence for the first time like 60 years ago. And so we have had time as transportation professionals, particularly in the social sciences and the planning field, to really study how it works. However, most of us, or a lot of us at the very least, don't really understand how it works. We don't really bother with it, or it's simply not our job to do it, right? And so given that in much of North America, there's such big unfamiliarity with public transportation, the benefits, the impact, and the value that it can bring to communities and to people, single residents, is really unknown and really foreign to a lot of people. So we have a vocal minority that often rises over the silent majority. I'm sure this is something that most of us, if not everyone, can really understand. So let's think about public participation, and most importantly, citizen participation. So are we really doing active transportation, or are we just applying tokenism to regular everyday issues regular everyday issues and the major transportation projects that we are undertaking in North America? Well, this is a complicated situation, and this is where the standards of our industry start to clash with the public good. So I want to ask ourselves, from our professional position as transportation professionals, whether it be engineer or planners or anything related to transportation, where do we want the citizen participation level to be in a certain issue, and where should it actually be? I'm more than certain that to a lot of us, level number 3 around the informing consultation area is the most comfortable space. After all, we have professional insights and we know what we are really doing. However, depending on the issue, and we really need to consider this for every aspect of transportation projects, the level can very much and very easily and very positively be at a much higher level, and we are simply not considering this. For example, something like the space around a station, the architectural style. To put it in something even simpler, the public art located at a station is something that we can give complete citizen control to, but we often don't. And as we know, these aspects, and which can also get very technical, are some things that we never really consider the community to give them citizen control, or at least delegation, but we very much can. And for the sake of the project at large, further that more than just the technicalities is something that we really should be doing. So what can we do? Like, there are emotional needs and misinformation and mutual priorities and many competing opinions, yet so much opportunity and so much learning for our industry and for the community as well to have in this field, particularly with public transportation. Let's ask ourselves, what is our role? This is step number 1. Who are we, and what role do we play in the transportation industry? Are we planners? Are we engineers? Are we any of the many varieties of engineers that influence our industry? Or are we simply accountants, managers, or superiors? We don't have to be involved with the planning process or with the pre-preparation process or with the consultation process to really make contribute to a proper, healthy community connection. After all, we are all people, and when, as professionals, we have personal skills that we often don't apply because we don't get the chance to communicate with each other. This is where it's valuable to, as an industry, come together and bring to the table. From maybe listen to what the planning department has to say, and despite you being a civil engineer or being management or anything, even HR at a private firm, you really have skills that you can contribute. Every single one of us have. So we can always do more. Furthermore, technology and analysis, especially in the 21st century, are essential tools that we rarely ever use for anything other than the technical aspects of developing transit projects. So how do we tackle NIMBY roots? We know that NIMBYism comes from distant and lack of representation. So how can we use technology to really understand and portray information to the community? So first of all, let's prepare and know and understand what is happening. As mentioned previously, we need to know the neighborhood. So understanding public engagement, what do we know about it? What do we know about previous experiences that we have been on? What do we know about different cultures? What do we know about different cities? And what do we know about external examples that maybe we are not experienced with, but we have read before? We have seen the news. We all follow the transportation field in some way or another, at least I would hope so in this, at CITE. So we all hear things that are happening around us. So let's ask ourselves as well, how can we foster collaboration in different audiences? Some people simply don't care. Some people simply are not really bothered, but they are very vocal about it because they have competing interests. This is a very, very, very human aspect of the transportation industry, and it's something goes ignored. And that's how you get major opposition and delays. And most importantly, above everything else, we need to develop an action plan. That is what will encompass everything that we are discussing here. Continuing on the topic of being ready and prepared, well, we know that from the internet, from our peers, from literature, we can really learn more about what is going on around us and successful examples. I know after we pass the educational aspect of our careers, sometimes people choose to not continue learning. But as we have seen, we have perhaps been failed by our education to really understand how we can really make a difference for the public engagement aspect of transportation projects. So how can we work with different agencies and different people to establish the trade-offs, to establish negotiations? What can we do, what can we give, and what can we take in order to make our transportation projects viable for the community more than just financially? Just as an example, to illustrate here, I said something like transit passes for nearby residents, which is not unseen or unheard of, particularly in the American Northwest. For example, if a project is in development, then you might be inclined, if obviously this would require interagency negotiations and discussions, to have transit passes for a year for nearby residents to really see and help the project integrate with the community. Furthermore, we need to develop education and relationships, and this is where perhaps the bulk of our change needs to happen. The way we communicate with communities is a very delicate relationship. And like as mentioned already previously in this presentation, there is NIMBYism that is fostered in our inaction. So the herd mentality always will dominate what is going on around us and how a project is influenced, at least in the public consultation phase. So what can we do? We can avoid technical rationalities and specific aspects that really do not support, do not communicate well with the community, and rather we can have proper, healthy information to what the community really cares for. And this will vary if there's a community of seniors, a community of families, young professionals. This will greatly vary, which is why this is a very general perspective. This is something that we all have to analyze case by case, and even within each case, we need to subdivide it into different aspects and how much we can give, how much we can take, and how can we engage with the community. How can the community truly be involved? I'm not asking for us to give up our goals, and after all, there are many interests and reasons why we are in the transportation industry, whether private or public field. But it really is essential that we reconsider how we are engaging with communities and what we are giving them. Let's remember that diversity is strength and resilience. The more diverse a human network is, the more resilient it will be to change and to persuasion, and the more resilient it will be to threats. So let's change our language. How can we change the way we communicate with people? Well, let's build relationships. Let's use a language that builds the relationships with people that matter, with the topics that matter to them. Of course, we also have to include technical aspects, and we also have to include many of the oftentimes perceived as boring discussions. But if we address from an early beginning what the community really cares for, then that is where we will see proper change. So let's try to be clear. Let's try to approach with our expertise what the community wants, and let's remember that consensus is the most important aspect. So how can we build consensus with the community? What is it that we can do? How can we reach them? Where can we reach them to really build this sense of community that they have and integrate ourselves as the representatives of the transportation industry into the community, however tight-knit it would be? Finally, location. We desperately need to go beyond just community meetings. We're just informing people. We're meeting at inconvenient times. We know that the system we use does not work. Oftentimes we think of the popular phrase of if it's not broken, don't fix it. But we understand that it's broken, and we still choose to not fix it because it simply takes a lot more effort than we first considered, especially in the 21st century in the North American context. So let's start with what demographics are our allies. Where can we meet those demographics? How can we start to form a community in favor of transportation? After all, people will listen based on the same herd mentality that can be used against us as in the transportation industry. Furthermore, let's use media. Going back to the technology aspect. The technology that we have available today is unprecedented, and understanding strategically how we can use technology through surveys, data management, or simply communication can really make a difference. For example, at the bottom here, I use the example of inclusive planning and how digital data surveys can, for example, be placed after the initial contact with the community, but before the bulk of the consultation. This can foster this environment where people see that perhaps the majority of their population in their community is in favor of transit rather than against. So, in other words, a tool for consensus building. Finally, over here to my right, I have some of the references I use, but to my left, I also have some literature for the reading that I find would be very useful for all of us to learn further in. Most of these are light reads. They're not complicated or very technical. And since NIMBYism is highly related to the housing situation, then unfortunately, most of these, well, half of these are related to housing, and so we really need to read with the topic of NIMBYism, at least in literature. We need to read from a very wide perspective, where we can really see the parallels between housing and transportation, rather than discarding it just because it doesn't have the aspect of transportation greatly embedded into it. So that's everything. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Andres. Again, any questions, feel free to put in the chat. Maybe I'll start off. Was there a particular event, was it a public meeting or something that you attended that triggered, I guess, the passion for presenting on a topic like this?
Well, actually, yeah. So I immigrated to Canada a few years ago, and I'm from Bogota, Colombia. And throughout my my childhood, there was great debate for the creation of a metro system in the city. Bogota currently is the largest city in the world without a metro system. So seeing public engagement and how politicized the issue was, it really made me see that sometimes people don't feel listened, and sometimes people, specifically NIMBYs, really politicize or overcomplicate some aspects of proposals just because they're presented in a way that is not accessible to them, with too much technicality, too many complicated aspects that don't help the argument at all. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. And Stephen, are you noticing any questions coming in the chat, or?
Nope.
Okay.
And
So
actually,
again,
I think Sean, you should probably be able to see the questions as well.
yeah, so I'm not seeing anything coming in, so just making sure that it's not just me, but it looks like, yeah, I'm not seeing any questions. So I'm not seeing anyone else. Andres, thank you very much. Thank you for representing the University of Waterloo, and wish you the best of luck in this competition. So to conclude the undergraduate portion of this competition, I will invite Dumi to turn on her camera, to load up her presentation, and just let me know when you are ready to go.
Okay. Sure. It's never flattering when you're trying to find the share your screen button and your face is just.
Yeah, so I can see the presentation just fine. I can hear you just fine. So
Perfect.
anytime you're ready, just let me know. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so I will begin my presentation. So hi everyone, I'm Dami Senaratna, and I'll be presenting an overview of the paper Alignment and Intersection Improvements of 30 Road and Yonge Street. So these are just the topics I will be going over today, and I will start with a brief introduction of the topic. So I'll start with the problem definition. So the intersection of interest is 30 Road and Yonge Street, located in the Niagara region. 30 Road is also known as Regional Road 14 and is a rural arterial connecting to the QEW from the community of Smithville in the township of West Lincoln. So over the past 5 years, the region has found an increasing number of collisions at the intersection of 30 Road and Yonge Street, as well as along the reverse curve of 30 Road. The current intersection is a two-way stop controlled, and the areas of safety concern include low visibility at the intersection as well as high speeds along the reverse curve. The need for the improvement of the intersection is urgent, as Smithville is a developing and expanding area, and the region of Niagara predicts that by the year 2041, traffic flows will drastically increase by 5%. So the scope of work outlined by our team, specifically major topics included in our final paper, are as follows. We will identify 3 alternatives to improve intersection safety and be able to meet future traffic demand, evaluate the alternatives based on a set criteria, determine the best alternative, define the design constraints, and create a detailed design of the improved intersection and road realignment. So moving on to the data preparation and collection. In the initial stages of this project, a literature review was conducted to provide a background in geometric design and road safety. Some notable references used were the Highway Safety Manual, the Highway Capacity Manual, along with various reports. The results from this literature review provided a summary of the studies, including design controls for the realignment of horizontal curves, safety analysis through crash modification factors, benefits of safety intersection types, criteria used when performing an environmental assessment, solutions to projects with similar scope, and an implementation of a complete street model. So as a team, in the month of November, we did take a site visit to the intersection with the region of Niagara. During our site visit, we were able to get a better sense of the area, such as sightlines and conflicting structures. In addition to the site visit, the region of Niagara provided us with various data outlining the existing conditions, such as the geometry of the area, existing traffic volumes, collision data of the past 5 years, utilities, and predicted future traffic volumes. So next I'll be going over our alternatives. As mentioned previously, there are a few issues that are identified along 30 Road. First, there are cars driving at high speeds along 30 Road just north of the reverse curve. The speed limit changes from 80 kilometers per hour to 60 kilometers per hour, but due to poor signage and the rural area, drivers often ignore the speed change. Lastly, at the intersection of 30 Road and Yonge Street, there's inadequate sight distance for the vehicles traveling eastbound and westbound. In order to solve these issues, we propose a full realignment of 30 Road. Due to the existing hydroelectric poles along 30 Road, it is difficult to adjust with the space constraints. Therefore, we are proposing to reconstruct approximately 350 meters of road on the north side of the hydro poles. This realignment will require approximately 2 acres of land to acquire from the neighboring property, and this will be implemented regardless of the change to the intersection that I'll be talking about a little bit later. So these are the intersections that we'll be looking at. So our first proposed change was an all-way stop control. This is just the addition of 2 stop signs at the north and south directions of 30 Road. Our second alternative is a roundabout. This alternative introduces a single lane roundabout that will be designed to accommodate the heavy vehicles that are frequently used in this intersection. And the last alternative looked at is a traffic signal. So next we'll be going over the evaluation process, starting with the evaluation criteria. So this consists of 4 categories: level of service, cost, environment, and safety. So the first category I'll be going over is level of service. The level of service is used to indicate the overall intersection performance. The LOS letter system goes from A to F, where A is the best and F is the worst. As per Highways Capacity Manual, LOS is defined through various ranges of control delay values. In order to assist with the ranking alternatives in such cases where the LOS grade was the same, we include the delays in our evaluation as an added measure. For our cost evaluation, the evaluation is broken down into 3 major categories, which are operating and maintenance, road users, and collisions. Operating and maintenance costs were covered through the dollar value associated with construction and any maintenance fees that would be accumulated to create a total value for the span of the project. Then we generated road user cost. Road user cost consisted of vehicle-related costs such as congestion and time. And finally, we determined collision costs using the HSM Societal Crash Cost Estimates by crash severity. Next, the environmental criteria were split into 2 factors: land usage, which consists of land needed to be acquired for the construction, and vehicle emissions caused by delay. To generate a final score, a function of both factors were used in addition to a ranking system. And lastly is safety. So crash modification factors are used to predict the expected number of crashes, often crashes after a countermeasure is implemented. In our case, we had 3 different countermeasures that are being implemented: a 2-way stop to an all-way stop, a 2-way stop to a roundabout, and a 2-way stop to a signalized intersection. The tables from the Highway Safety Manual were used to find the CMF factors for each case, and these factors are then used to predict the reduction of collisions for each intersection. For the actual evaluation of alternatives, it is based off of the given criteria I just previously mentioned. So the first place alternative would be given a score of 100, and the second place 75, and the third place 50. So each alternative is ranked from 1 to 3. These scores are then accumulated and multiplied by the predetermined weights as seen in the equation. So that includes 0.4 for safety, 0.2 for LOS, 0.15 for delay, 0.15 for cost, and 0.1 for environmental. The weights of these determined were based off of our client's values, obviously with safety being the highest weight, that is the most important, and capacity following. So this slide shows the final scores for each category for each alternative. Just to summarize, the roundabout did get the best scores in all categories except for the environmental, and this was due to the amount of land needed to acquire in order to construct the roundabout. The final scores of roundabout with the 97.5, signalized second with a score of 72.5, and always stop in third with a score of 60. So this determined our best alternative as a roundabout based on our evaluation criteria. In addition, a sensitivity analysis was conducted to see if the changing of our weights of each criteria will alter the optimal solution. Safety was given the most importance. So for the first sensitivity analysis, the weight of safety was adjusted. Case 3 is our base case, and as you can see, we reduced and increased the weight by 5%. The table on the right, you will see the final scores for each case. It is clear that the roundabout was still the best solution with the signalized intersection from second and the always stop in third, showing that roundabout is our optimal solution. So next I'll be going over our detailed design. So as part of our project, we will be designing the road realignment and the roundabout. So we've started with the roundabout. It is the larger area of concern. I'll be going over the geometric design basics as well as constraints. So the constraints we defined for the roundabout are the location of the hydro poles as mentioned before, as well as the large vehicle, design vehicle. We are going with the WV50 and the environmental boundaries. So there are protected environmental wetlands that we do not want to cross. So our basic geometric design is with an inscribed diameter of 40 meters, a design speed of 30 kilometers per hour, and the center island is 20 meters, and the truck apron will allow for a deflection of 1.5 meters. The entry radius on 30 Road is 40 meters, and the 20 meters on Yonge Street. In addition to the geometry of the roundabout, we have also been looking at the sight distance, as that is important for safety, as well as making adjustments to our design. So the stopping sight distance are as follows. It is approach sight distance on the circulatory roadway, and the sight distance for a crosswalk. As of right now, the sight distance to crosswalk is not being considered as there is no existing sidewalk, but based on our client's needs, we will adjust accordingly. In addition to the stopping sight distance, we are also considering the intersection sight distance. So that is the length of approach leg of the sight triangle, as long as the length of conflicting leg on the sight triangle. And then for both intersection sight distance, the entry stream, as well as the circulating stream, traffic is being considered. And then finally, I will go over conclusions. So as of right now, our preliminary stages are complete. So our best alternative was determined to be the roundabout. We have defined the design constraints with the existing area, as well as started the basic geometric design of the roundabout. And this was conducted using the TAC manual specifications. Our next steps include analyzing the roundabout, the road realignment with regards to safety capacity needs currently and future, creating an accurate cost estimate using estimating software, and creating a rough construction timeline to present to the clients so they have an idea of a schedule and maintenance. And finally, continuing iterations of both the roundabout and the road realignment to design to ensure the best design achieves both safety and capacity. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm open to any questions.
Thanks very much, Demi. I do have one question that's showing in the chat. What was the annual growth rate that you evaluated the model with?
So we were given the existing traffic data as well as the projected future traffic data, and using a linear growth model, we calculated a growth rate of about 5%. And that was just based off of the region's data that they had provided to us.
Okay. Another question that came in. During the evaluation of the alternatives, have you looked at the construction impacts of all alternatives or only the preferred?
The construction impacts, so the construction impacts would have fallen under the environmental assessment. So considering, like, I guess it wasn't a huge thing that we considered. We were considering it more for the final design, as we consider more just the capacity and the effects of that environmental from each design, as the construction costs per design varied intensely, with the always stop being very easy to implement and the roundabout being pretty difficult to implement. But for evaluation, we found it was more important to look at the capacity rather than the environmental.
Okay. And I think I was tipped off that another question may be coming in, but I'll ask mine in the meantime. You used intersection level of service as one of the evaluation parameters. Did you look at critical movement analysis? So any particular movement that had a poor performance or better performance, and whether or not that drove why the signalized intersection came out at level service C, whereas everything else came out at A or something, right?
Yeah, so we did look at critical. So the biggest thing, it's not mentioned in the slides, but the biggest thing that we found was our left turn movements from 30 onto Yonge Street, as it was quite high because that's how you would get onto the QEW. And so that was the one thing that wasn't reflected as well through the synchro models that we use to evaluate the LOS, but instead we noticed that issue as well. So we tried to redistribute the traffic as best as possible to make it kind of even out a little bit, but even doing so, the roundabout was still always the best level of service, so it was kind of just a given.
Okay, one more question that came in. Usually roundabouts need property acquisition depending on the right-of-way. Has that been looked at? And if so, was it reflected in the cost of the alternatives?
Yes, it was reflected in the cost of the alternatives. For our specific project, however, because it is a capstone project, we are working with the region of Niagara as well. And land acquisition is kind of assumed to be, there's a dollar value associated with it, but it's associated to not be difficult to acquire, which is not very representative of the real life world. But for our project in specific, any kind of land that we do need to acquire, we have a dollar value attached to it. However, we're assuming that if we need it, we will get it.
And so basically the hope is that a development application will come on all four corners, it's all donated gratuitously and no one has to pay for it, right? So,
yes.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. So thank you very much. And thank you for representing Ryerson. Also, thank you for stepping in when you did. So thank you very much. It's an interesting project. Before we move on to the graduate category, now that the questions have come into this portal, I'm going to ask Andres, this is sort of unusual. I'm going to ask Andres if he can come back. There is a question from your particular presentation that didn't make it in just in time for the presentations. I'm wondering if he can possibly answer to this. So Andres, if you're still there. Yes.
Hi. Yeah.
So in the slides, there was a statement that said, what demographics are our allies? Could you explain this particular piece a bit more? What does allies mean in this context?
Yeah, so obviously the transportation field is very wide in general, right? But depending on the project and depending on so many things like including geographic differences, cultural differences, the different members of a community sometimes have different opinions on it. So for example, in the West Coast, it's generally very understood that young professionals are a lot more in favor of active transportation than seniors or even young people. So understanding our community, that's why it's understanding our community, because we can learn which members of the community are more in favor and why.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks for stepping back in. I hate to do this at Doomy. I'm going to pull you back into the mix. It looks like we've got one more question that came through. This is with respect to truck traffic. So curious about truck safe turning being assessed in the proposed roundabout, whether or not the truck apron had been concerned. So I do remember some statement about a truck apron, but maybe you can elaborate.
Yes, so the truck apron is used for any kind of deflection, but the truck apron, we're trying to design the roundabout. I am unmuted, right? Yes, I am. Okay. We're trying to design the roundabout so the truck apron is not needed. So the inscribed radius and the lane width, which is about 4 meters, I believe, should be large enough for any turning movements for the large trucks that are expected to go through the intersection.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for indulging again on the technicalities. So with that, that concludes the undergraduate portion of this competition. And so now, before we begin the graduate competition, we're just going to do a little bit of troubleshooting for videos. So I'm going to ask Shayla if she can turn on her camera and also just load up her presentation just to make sure that we've got this. So we'll take a bit of an icebreaker here. Shayla, we can see you. I think I can hear you loud and clear. If you want to go ahead and share your presentation.
How am I supposed to share the presentation?
So Stephen, maybe if you can just do a verbal walkthrough.
Is it
I just made
show
you
my screen or something like, no?
You got it.
Okay, so we can see your screen. Now it looks like we just need to get to the beginning of the PowerPoint. Yeah, so we see your PowerPoint, so that should be good.
Like this?
Yeah,
Can
so
you
now we
see
just
the?
need to. Yeah, so now you're on whichever slide you are. So I think now you're on your cover page. So I think we're good to go. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So with that, I'm happy to open the graduate portion of the competition. Shayla, if you're ready, I can certainly start with you. And
Oh yeah, sure.
yeah, and if you just let me know when you're ready, I will start the clock accordingly.
Okay. And just one more thing, how to keep track of the time. I know that
So
you said that you will be popping on the.
I'll pop up with my little 2-minute warning. Otherwise, if you've got a clock next to you, that's probably the best I can encourage you to do.
Okay, yeah. I don't know how. Okay, yeah, no problem. Okay.
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 So anytime.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can start now. Just 1 minute. Sorry. I'm really sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, you can just see my slides, not the other things, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and because I can see the webinar and other things, so yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can start.
Very good. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Shaila Jamal, and I am a PhD candidate at McMaster University. And today, actually, I will be talking about a topic of my PhD, and that's something like I will be talking about the automobility behavior of the millennials and older adults in Hamilton. So before I go to my main presentation, I just want to acknowledge the contribution of my supervisors, Dr. Bruce Newbold and Darren Scott. Without them, this study won't be possible. And thanks for supervising me. And also this study was supported by a Social Science and Humanity Research Council of Canada. And I also want to acknowledge the doctoral fellowship I received from SHARC. Okay. So as my topic is about talking about the generational differences in travel behavior. So why do we need a generational lens? Basically in this study, or let's say today's presentation, I am focusing on 2 generations. One is the baby boomers or the older generations, and another one is the millennials. So baby boomers generation, we actually label them those who are born between 1945 to 1964. So basically the people who just born after the post World War II period. And the millennials, we define them as those who born between 1980 to 2000. So if we look into the broader literature in the North American or also the Canadian literature, we can see that the older adults, they are mostly automobile oriented and their transit use is quite limited. And for the millennials, they are quite younger still. So their travel behavior is mostly characterized by the multimodality, and they actually like to use bike, walk more, and use transit. And for Canadian perspective, we are actually expecting to see a huge difference between these 2 generations because they are actually going through different life stages. Most of the millennials are already in the workforce, and others will be going soon. And for the older adults or this baby boomers generation, most of them are already on the retirement phase or soon to be retired. And if we look into the Canadian demographic, according to the 2016 census, there are almost 17% Canadian populations are older adults, and they have predicted that by the 2031, almost one in every 4 Canadians will be age 65 or over or a senior. And all in Canada, millennials already comprise of 28% of the Canadian population. And the literature suggests that different factors impact their travel behavior, and that includes socio-demographic, built environment, lifestyle, a lot of things. But for this project, this presentation, we actually focusing on the living arrangement and the attitude towards transportation modes and their residential location preferences. So based on that, the main objective of this presentation is to look into 2 research questions. One thing is, are millennials less auto-oriented than the older adults? And the second thing is, we would like to explore, is there any evidence that millennials' living arrangements and their attitudes and preferences impact their automobility behavior different than that of the older adults? And our study area was city of Hamilton. And if we look into the demography of the city of Hamilton is have more aging population compared to any of the municipalities in Canada. So as per Statistics Canada, by 2022, approximately 24% of the Hamilton population is already 65 or older. And also, like, according to the city statistics, 25% of the city's population are millennials. So what we can see that this both age cohort has almost similar percentage of the population in Hamilton. So as they have this represent almost similar percentage, we actually collected equal number of responses from these 2 generations. And so 100 from the millennials and 100 responses from the seniors. And we conducted the survey from October to November in 2019. And like other travel surveys, we collected travel characteristics, socio-demographic, and living arrangement, their level of technology use, and different attitudinal and lifestyle preferences related questions. So the questionnaire has a lot of questions related to their attitudes and preferences, especially in terms of travel behavior. And as our focus is also look into more deeply on the automobility behavior, we had almost 12 statements specific towards driving for a typical weekday trip. And also we asked them about the reasons for choosing a residential location and what is their preferred characteristics of their residential location. And like automobility behavior, we actually considered 4 attributes. So one of them is using automobile as a common mode of transport and possession of a valid driver's license and using automobile as a driver or a passenger. And another one is like the number of automobiles in the household. So as a method for the first 3 attributes, we used binary logic model. And the last one, we use ordinal logistic model. So when looking into the findings here, for the time constraint, I only presented 2 model results. One is for the most common, using automobile as a most common mode of transportation, and another one is the number of vehicles in the household. So this slide actually presents the results of the binary logistic model that has dependent variable as the using automobile as the most common mode of transportation in 2018. So this slide actually shows that regardless of generation, we can see that the females are less likely to be auto-oriented compared to the male. And also for both generations who are living alone are more auto-oriented, like they are using automobiles as their most common mode of transportation. compared to those who belong to multi-person household. And also, like as expected, the individuals those belongs to household that has no vehicle, they're less likely to be auto-oriented. And also like possession of a valid driver's license and also not using transit actually increase their tendency to be more auto-oriented. The next thing is like if we are focusing on the attitude, as the survey has collected a lot of attitudinal variable. So one thing is if we see that those who say that they are not interested in driving, they are less likely to be auto users. But one interesting finding is that some people actually say that they prefer to walk than driving, but still looks like their most common mode of transportation was actually auto. So it's like maybe they don't have any choice, or maybe they prefer to walk, but still they are auto oriented. And then when we are focusing on the generation specific attitudes and how they are interacting with the attitudinal statement, so we can see that the millennials who agreed that using auto alternative modes like transit, bicycle, and walk meet their travel needs, they said that it is less likely, they are less likely to be auto oriented compared to the older adults and the millennials. And also, like when we asked about their preference towards residential characteristics, so millennials who actually agreed that they actually preferred lots of off-street parking in their neighborhood, they tend to be more auto-oriented. And compared to the older adults and also the millennials who did not prefer street parking in their neighborhood. So this actually indicates that the attitudes actually impact their automobility, like each generation, how the attitude they have or the attitude they possess, that actually impact their automobility behavior. And this is the second model that actually has the results of the number of vehicles owned by the household and what are the factors that impact. So there are few interesting findings in this model actually. So we can see that the millennials household had more likely to have higher number of vehicles compared to the older adults. And also we can see like the studentship is positively associated with higher number of vehicle ownership, and number of like the household vehicle ownership also increases with the higher number of adults living in the household. And so these interesting thing, we will discuss them later why this is happening. But the other general findings are like those who primarily use auto for their daily trips and high income household, they are more likely to have higher number of automobiles. And in terms of attitudes, those who mention that they need a car to do many things, they are more likely to own greater number of automobiles. So one of the focus of this study was to look into the living arrangement of both generation. So if we look into whether they're living with a spouse or partner, so we can see that millennials who are actually not living with a partner or a spouse have the highest propensity of owning a higher number of automobiles compared to all other households. And for the older adults, this is something opposite, like those who are living with a partner and spouse are more likely to own a higher number of automobiles. And if we look into the type of dwellings they are living, so millennials who are living in other types of dwellings except apartments, they have actually the highest propensity to own a higher number of automobiles compared to the other groups. And older adults showing something opposite, that those who live in other types of dwellings are more likely to own automobiles compared to the older adults who live in the apartments. And like when we are looking into the cohort interactions with the attitudinal variable, we can see that the millennials who did not agree that easy to use public transit where they live have the highest propensity to own a higher number of automobiles compared to the millennials who mentioned that the opposite and older adults. So, and if we focus only on the older adults generation, those who agreed that it is easier to use public transit from their residence, they are actually owning fewer automobiles compared to those who did not agree on the statement. All these findings are actually the interpretation of the interactions effect here we have with the cohorts. So this is actually the findings we had for the two models, one for using automobile as a common mode of transport and another one is the number of vehicles owned by the household. So for a discussion, definitely this study has a limitation that it is actually based on cross-sectional data and the sample size is actually low, which we acknowledge that this is one of the limitations. But actually, even through this study, it actually highlights some interesting findings regarding the intergenerational perspective on the automobility and in Hamilton. And one thing we wanted to look into how living arrangement actually impacts that automobility behavior. So we can see that it, like how an individual, whether they're living alone or living with a partner or living in an apartment, these factors actually impact their automobile use and the number of vehicle ownership in the household. And as I mentioned in the previous slides, that there are some interesting finding in the vehicle ownership model. So one thing is the student and millennial households are more likely to own a higher number of automobiles than the older adults in Hamilton. So one of the possible reason could be that because of their delayed life cycle and economic conditions, millennials are still living with their parents. And that actually we found in the survey that almost 34% of the millennials in our survey were living in with their parents. And also for the delayed life cycle, like millennial generation, they are actually doing higher studies compared to the other generations. And also they are delaying their family formation phase and family extension. So that's the reason actually that they are actually living with their parents, many of the millennials, and because of that, the number of vehicle ownership on the household is actually represented, could be the representation of their parents' household, not their own household, because they are living with their parents. And we also found that the attitudes and preference towards sustainable travel behavior, like they like transit or they love to walk, then the transit, they are actually influencing both generations' automobility behavior. And when we look into the effect size in the model, like the effect size, that actually says that the attitudes and preference towards sustainable travel behavior actually influencing millennials to be less oriented compared to the older adults. And also in the study, we found that there is among the older adults, there is a group of older adults who are more mobile and multimodal compared to the other groups. And which means it's not they are only automobile, they are using non-automobile modes as well. And as the research suggests that there is a possible underlying reason for this, that maybe as they are going through the retirement phase, maybe there is an affordability could be an issue or the economic condition. Maybe that's why older adults are using transit or other modes, or it could be simply that they are actually preferring to be multimodal, or they are actually preferring modes that is more accessible and suit their travel purpose. So finally, not only for this two models, but we had other models in that study. So we still can't conclude whether millennials in Hamilton are less oriented than the older adults in general, as the millennials are still in the earlier phase of their family formation. And also, like if we look into the millennial generation, the older millennials, the older group of the millennials, they actually started their career during the Great Recession of 2008 to 2009. So there is a period effect there. And they actually face severe employment and housing market crises. And this for the younger generation of millennials, like in 2020, they are again facing some economic instability due to COVID-19 and the housing market crisis. And especially if we see that there is a Statistics Canada report on the COVID impact, and it has been shown that millennials have been impacted, like the job has been impacted a lot due to the COVID-19, especially in the service-oriented industry. So another thing is actually like the millennials will no longer be in the young adult category. So it's like they are getting age, or let's say older, so they won't be young adults anymore, and they are supposed to move out. If we see the general trend, they are supposed to move out from the high density urban neighborhood after achieving the life course milestone, like getting a better job or forming a family or having children. But these things might be delayed because of the sudden price hike in the market during the COVID-19 period, especially for the housing market price. So one thing is, like, these events will definitely impact their behavior, both as a consumer in the economy and also a commuter, along with discretionary travel there. So here are some future direction, like as I mentioned, the survey or the study data was collected in the pre-COVID era. We collected the data in 2019 from October and November. But this COVID-19 pandemic may have two significant impacts on automobility. One is like the pandemic has prompted changes in living arrangement, especially for the millennials, because it might have delayed their moves to a less dense urban area. Or many of the millennials, if we look into the reports and studies, that they are actually returning to live with their parents because of the online activities and online classes and everything. So, and the second thing is, many individuals, it's not only the millennials, but the other generations, older adults, they have shifted toward technology-oriented substitutes and telework. So that might have impacted their travel behavior, especially if they're shifting towards personal mode of transport. And because of the COVID, many of the people are actually avoiding transportation modes that needs to be shared with others. So one of the future directions we are hoping to conduct is to explore the impact of COVID-19 on the travel behavior of different generations in Canada, and see whether there has been any heterogeneity in terms of their travel behavior. It's not just between the generation or among the generation, there could be some heterogeneity within the generation. So we would like to explore that as well. Okay, so that is actually the end of my presentation. Thank you, and I welcome any questions if anyone have.
Thank you. I find it appropriate that you referred to the recession of 2008, 2009 as the Great Depression. That's the one that I lived through, and I remember that very well because my income suffered very greatly at that period when I was first starting out in the field. I have a question from Omar. Did this study find direct relationship between automobility and the availability of transit or bike share services? And if so, how does the generational behavior compare between urban, suburban, and rural residents?
Thanks for the question, Omar. That is actually right now we are exploring. Like it's not like we are actually doing some GIS related analysis and how because we have the locations of these people and how access to bike share, is it impacting them or not, something like that's something actually we are actually thinking to see some differences, because we think for the millennials, they are actually more bike oriented compared to the older generation. So yes, that's something difference we are hoping to see, but I can't share the findings because we haven't completed the study yet. But for the transit, we already have seen that if just towards their attitudes towards transit or the biking. So if they're saying that they are actually preferring a lot or something like that, especially for the millennials, these attitudes actually impact them to be less auto-oriented compared to the older generations.
Okay, and just
And the
awaiting
one
any.
thing
Go ahead.
sorry, one thing I also want to mention is these studies we actually done based on the attitudes they have, their perception on everything, but with the especially the measurable thing, like where they live and where is the bike shares hub here or the transit stop here. Those objective measures we haven't measured them yet. So, but something we have a plan to do very soon. Yeah.
Okay, and any other questions coming in through the chat or the question portal? Okay, seeing none. Sheila, thank you very much, and thank you for representing McMaster in this competition, and wish you all the best in this competition. So, with that, I will ask Adonai to please turn on your camera and load up your presentation. I hope I pronounced your first name.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great. Let me show my screen. Can you see my presentation full screen?
Not yet, so give you a few seconds just to try that again.
What about now?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
So, anytime you're ready, just let me know, and ready to go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is the presentation of capacitated electric cargo bike routing problem with a single depot by me, Adonai Garcia, and with the supervision of Dr. Kevin Gingrich and Dr. Megli Nurinjad from York University. Electric cargo bikes, electric cargo bikes, ECBs from now on, we're going to call them ECBs, are commonplace in European countries such as the Netherlands, but have not been widely adopted in North America yet. As the battery industry becomes more efficient and cost-effective, there's a positive impact ECBs are having in our modern cities, not only for logistic companies, that's good to know, but for groceries and parenting even. The International Transport Forum statistics suggest that the delivery of fleet will be competing with passenger transport for access to road infrastructure and parking, as goods transport will represent up to 18% of road traffic by 2050. ECBs represent a way to solve that problem, as the European Cyclists Federation suggests that 50% of all light goods and 25% of all goods could be delivered by cargo bikes within the city. Okay. For companies, last mile urban deliveries are difficult, and trucks and vans are expensive to acquire, maintain, operate, and cover. Additional costs such as parking fines and congestion charges. ECBs don't have to deal with these issues, but battery range, which is the maximum distance each bike can reach, and load capacity, which is the maximum weight each bike can carry. Why does this matter? This is important. For logistics companies, using a cargo bike that can run out of energy anytime and anywhere could be a challenge. That's why we wanted to create a base model for solving the capacitated electric cargo bike routing problem to optimize the travel cost by deciding how many customers each bike can visit without running out of energy and going over the load capacity. ECBs used by city logistics companies are relatively new, and the need to understand how they work and how to preserve their efficiency is important in the urban goods distribution ecosystem to a more widespread adoption. Academic papers and books on the efficiency and battery life of cargo bikes have been reviewed for this presentation. Papers that indicated the barriers to usage of an e-bike being its cost, weight, battery life, infrastructure limitation, and social stigma. Others that concluded electric assisted cargo bikes are most cost-effective than delivery trucks for deliveries in close proximity to the distribution center. Some of them have simulated an exercise on 3 demand variables, trip generation, trip length, and trip duration, with different battery recharge rates for an electric bike sharing system. Others design a mathematical model that estimates the required motor power in bike trips due to the speed, weight, road grade, and wind effects. And others developed a prototype of an ideal bike for a sharing system. Some of the parameters reviewed here are used in this presentation to find this relationship between the motor power, voltage, battery capacity, speed, consumption rate, and battery range in order to create a Python code based on the capacitated vehicle routing problem model presented by Kijun Kim in 2020. So what are we going to see? We're going to see the relationship of the factors that I just told you. Power, voltage of the motor, battery capacity, maximum speed, and load capacity. Then we are going to formulate the capacitated electric cargo bike routing problem and demonstrate the problem with a numerical example, and finally draw some conclusions. For commercial ECVs, the power and the voltage of the model, the battery capacity, the maximum speed, and the load capacity are already given by their design. We can change these elements, of course, if we want to improve the efficiency, but for most of them, a metropolitan road network would be all right, as long as the battery range and the load capacity are not exceeded. The distance an ECV can travel to reach the battery capacity will depend on its consumption rate, the average speed, and the distance traveled, where the consumption rate is represented by this formula. When working with ECVs, we have electric cargo bikes with limited carrying and battery capacity, a demand to supply at different locations and with different ways, and only one spot from where the bikes are starting and ending their trip, without, of course, relying on a recharging station network, which we don't have in most of the cities. So the problem is to meet the demand of all customers at the lowest cost while never exceeding the load capacity of the bike and making sure it doesn't run out of energy before returning to the depot. That's why our objective function is to minimize the total distance travel, but it's subject to certain constraints, such as each customer is visited only once, a bike always departs from the depot, the number of bikes coming in and out from a customer is always the same. The load capacity, battery capacity, and battery range of each bike are never exceeded. And for this particular case, we remove the subtours. And finally, we have a binary variable, which equals 1 if a bike visits a customer and 0 otherwise. It is assumed also that each bike will start fully charged from the depot and make only one trip. And time windows and time penalties are not considered in this model. We wanted to make it simple. Let's go with numbers, because I know as an engineer, we love numbers, right? So we use the proposed model to compare 2 ECV models from different brands and different technical specifications in different scenarios. In this case, we use the Babos, which are the ones that we're working with at York University, and the Virtus, which are they have lower capacity and of course are cheaper. For these scenarios, we generated 10 customers at random locations around the depot, which was York University, of course, with a maximum distance established, also randomly generated, and 4 maximum demands per client for each distance. Every scenario considered 2 different speeds below the maximum speed, 10 and 20 kilometers per hour, actually, but that didn't make any change in any aspect because the consumption rate is too small between one and another. Additionally, for distances greater than 30 kilometers and a maximum demand per client of 60 kilograms, the ECVs can be compared because one of the models is not feasible. So the following results I'm going to show you are 18 scenarios for each bike that were run. As we can see from comparing the objective function, the values that you're seeing in this table, a rise in the maximum demand per customer can affect the total distance traveled. This happens because each bike has to visit different customers to not exceed the load capacity. It's not always going to the next one. It's up to the load capacity. This table shows that the bikes required are affected by both distance and demand per customer. In this figure, we can see that if the demand is low, distances are similar for each model. Also, as the demand and the distances per customer increase, the total distance for the bikes with lower capacity increases significantly. This figure shows that for lower demands and distances, either bike can be used indistinctly. But for greater demands, even with small distances, the number of bikes with lower capacity can be double of the ones with higher capacity. For customers closer to the depot and lower demand, there's no difference in the number of bikes and the load required. After a certain distance, of course, for example, an extra virtual bike is needed while the number of babos remains equals, as you can see in this figure. How is this information beneficial for the company? That's a good question. So, well, the company needs to evaluate if it's better to have more cheaper bikes than expensive ones, but that also means to have more employees for riding those bikes. Also, if the company is dealing with customers that are close to the depot and the demand is low, it doesn't have to invest in more expensive bikes because the cheaper ones can do the job. These are some plotting examples from different scenarios. We did it that way because it looks better and more understandable, but the distances are based on Google Maps. And if we want to extract the data, of course, we can do it. I know you are all excited about this topic, but I have to finish because of the time. So let's talk about the conclusions. The key contribution of this model is that it can be used to decide which type and how many bikes the company must acquire for a certain number of customers of a specific distance from the depot. Other results obtained are a rise in the maximum demand per customer can affect the total distance traveled. Speed doesn't make any change on the variables analyzed, at least when time windows and penalties are not considered. As the distance and the demand increase, the load is better distributed, meaning lower as other bikes are required. And finally, if the demand is low, distances are very similar for each ECB model. For future research, this model can be extended and consider time windows, time penalties, multiple depots, multiple trips per bike per day, different bike models as part of the fleet, the effect of density on this kind of bikes, and of course our recharging station network. We did it this way because we are planning to run a pilot with the Babos bikes, so we can know if the model is right. Okay, so thank you so much for your attention. I'm open for any questions and comments that you have.
Thanks very much, Adam. I'm just going to open up the question panel, see if anything's come up, as well as the chat. Okay. Question. Wondering if the temperature should be part of the model as it will impact the range.
Yeah, well, actually, we didn't measure the temperature here, but we have information. But we were working on another project, and we can see that temperature makes a whole different difference between the users that are using a bike sharing system or not. And so that's something we can apply for future research, of course.
Okay. Any other questions either through the chat or through the question portal? Okay. Seeing none, and thanks very much, and thank you for representing York University in this competition. So with that, I will ask Tanvir, who is also representing York University, to turn his camera on and to load his presentation.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes, just give me a sec. Can you guys see my presentation
Yes.
in the presenter
So,
mode, right?
yes. So, anytime you're ready.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. Actually, I will start right away. I will not take that much time. Hello,
Just a
everyone.
point of order, Tanvir, it looks like we are seeing a split screen. So, I'll just give you a moment to see if you want to just remove the. There we go. Yeah.
Now all good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're good.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to presenting at this presentation competition. And at first, I would like to thank my supervisor, Dr. Peter Park. And oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Tanvi Chaudhary, PhD candidate from York University. Currently, today I'm going to present to you guys one of my research topic. That one is impact of truck platooning on passing side distance of two-lane highways in North America. As all of we know that good movement serves as the fuel for the development of modern civilization. Nowadays, the most imminent and most promising V2V technology in the good movement industry will be semi or fully automated mm, truck platooning, which refers two or more trucks wirelessly connected to travel as a convey. The Society of Automotive Engineers proposed that driving automation from level 0 to level 5, where level 0 indicates that to control the truck, human driver need to be involved fully. But when we are thinking about level 5 automation, the human driver in the platoon HCVs are replaced by machine drivers. All of us could see long combination vehicle in short LCV running on our roadways nowadays. So according to the Canadian Geometry Design Guideline, maximum 25-meter length of LCV are allowed to operate on the designated roadways. The progression of on V2V technology shows a light that while truck will travel as a convey, the society may perceive enormous amount of benefit from socio-economic aspects. It is reported that fuel consumption can be reduced by up to 6% for the lead truck and up to 10% for the following truck. Perhaps the biggest benefit for operating truck platooning in the view of logistic industry will come from chance that they can reduce one or more human drivers to control trucks. In the USA, it is estimated that at least additional 0.16 million truck driver will be needed by 2028. Where in Canada, this shortage can reach to 34,000 by 2024. Some jurisdiction in North America, such as California, Texas, Florida states in the USA, and in Ontario province in Canada allows operating and testing truck platooning techniques along the designated multi-lane, divided and limited access highways only. But if we see our Ontario map, we could see easily that our most of the highways are connected to the two-lane rural highways. So and the percentage is so high. So if we want to get significant amount of benefit for truck platooning operation from the fuel consumption saving and the driver shortage and reducing the driver shortage issue, in that case, these trucks need to travel also along the two-lane rural highways. So, in addition to the freeway segments, we should also assess that whether our two-lane rural highways are able to accommodate these truck platooning techniques. What we are seeing a huge prospect in the recent days. Here in this image, here you could see that truck is running on the. Can I put the laser point? Yeah. Here you could see, I will actually pause this one more time. Here you could see that when truck platooning is running, the passenger vehicle, the fast moving passenger car will not able to get enough space probably to overtake, and they need to stack behind. So in that case, they may feel impatient and they may try to violate the rules of the roadways, and which will create a safety hazard. And in the case, if we can provide longer passing side distance to allow the overtaking, in that case, we may see that uh, maybe one car or two car could able to overtake, but still it's a safety concern. So through this study, our major objective is to achieve that to estimate the appropriate passing side distance for truck platooning and long combination vehicle on North American two-lane rural highways using an analytical and simulation method. The second objective is to compare the passing side distance estimated for truck platooning and long combination vehicle with the passing side distance suggested in the North American Highway Geometric Design Standard. So far, no evidence has been identified which indicates the impact of passing side distance for truck platooning on the two-lane rural highway. Since none of the earlier model has touched upon the passing side distance for truck platooning, so to estimate passing side distance for truck platooning, a new mathematical model has been proposed by modifying Glannon's mathematical model in this study. So according to 2017 tech manual, WB20 is the maximum length of a single unit truck. So in this study, therefore in this study, the truck platooning is considered as a group of single unit truck, single unit WB20 category truck. Here, what's the result? From the result, what we can see, the result showed that here we can see that the blue line is the tech geometric design guideline. According to the tech geometric design guideline, what is the passing side distance? And the red line here showing us according to 2018 AASHTO geometric design guideline. So what we could see, it is needed to mention that the 2017 tag geometric design guideline passing side distance is similar to 2004 AASHTO geometric design guideline. So from the result, what we could see here that 2017 tag passing side distance is sufficient to allow cars to overtake 2 or 3 truck platooning on two-lane highways in Canada. However, the 2018 AASHTO is not sufficient to accommodate minimum passing side distance for overtaking 2 or more trucks traveling in a platoon in the entire speed range. The result indicates that passing side distance requirement is almost 1.5 to 1.8 times more at 90 km/h speed than the 2018 AASHTO geometric design guideline. The passing side distance estimated for overtaking an HCV platoon, for example, 3 HCV platoon, here we could see that in the top, this one is the 3 HCV platoon and headway is 1.2 second headway. They are much longer, about 145 meter longer than those for overtaking long combination vehicle TD. That means turn peak double. Here TD indicates turn peak double and B train indicates our according to the Canadian standard B-train long combination vehicle. So what else we identify as well? 2017 tech passing side distance provides sufficient for passenger vehicle to pass all 6 trucks options over the entire speed range, which is up from 50 to 130 kilometer per hour. The 2018 AASHTO passing side distance, on the contrary, provides inadequate passing side distance for each of the 6 truck driving conditions. What we could identify from here. Sorry, I don't know why it's lagged. Yeah. The traveling lane and the opposing lane traffic volume, driving behavior, vehicle acceleration, deceleration, traffic speed, and also traffic composition, passing opportunities. All of those factors actually play a vital role in overtaking maneuver on the two-lane rural highway. So to understand what's the, because the static model gives us the exact value, but it's not considering the ununiformity of the driving behavior. So to estimate what's could happen in the real world circumstances, we have we have actually developed, performed a micro simulation analysis. To do the micro simulation analysis, we have considered 3 real world scenarios. The results are not identical to the analytical approach. Here you could see on the right screen that a passenger vehicle is overtaking 2 truck platooning together. So in this simulation environment, we have considered that if a passenger vehicle need to overtake a truck platoon, they need to overtake platoon together, because if with the V2V technology, if any passenger vehicle just overtake one truck in the convoy, what will happen that the distance will increase between the connected trucks, so which will actually hamper on their connectivity, and they will lose they will lose the connection of the truck platooning techniques, and we will not get that benefit. So the simulation approach, from the simulation approach, what we have observed that the overtaking distance, in here on the right side, you could see also that the considered 3 scenarios. Where scenario 1, the traveling lane traffic volume was about 600 vehicle per hour, and in the scenario 3, the traveling lane traffic volume was 250 vehicle per hour. But if we see the opposing lane traffic volume, we could see that in the scenario 3, the number is very less. So that means that in these circumstances, vehicle will have less problem, will face less problem actually to overtake. So what we can observe that in all truck platooning conditions, overtaking maneuvers occurs at less than 1,000-meter distance. It has been noticed that in all 3 considered traffic scenario environment, approximately 75% passenger vehicle has completed passing maneuver of long combination vehicle, that is B train, and a long combination vehicle turn pick double within the AASHTO passing side distance, that which was 440-meter. However, in all 3 scenarios, less than 25% passenger vehicle accomplished the overtaking of 2 and 3 truck platooning um, at 0.6 second and 1.2 second time headway, according to the AASHTO passing side distance. On the other hand, more than 25%, more than 75% of the passenger vehicle has finished the overtaking maneuver of 2 and 3 truck platooning, 0.6 second and 1.2 second headway. within the 2017 tag passing side distance, which is 860 meter. So the simulation result showed clearly that 2018 AASTO passing side distance does not provide sufficient length for the passenger vehicle to overtake any of the 6 truck driving options. The 2017 tag passing side distance provides sufficient length for the passenger vehicle to pass the 2 LCV options and good enough length for the passenger vehicle to pass a um, two track platoon, but it is well short of the required 85th percentile overtaking distance for operating 3 track platooning options. The simulation also showed that it appears to be very challenging for a passenger vehicle to pass a 3-track platooning. From the analytical and simulation analysis, what we have observed that what we can conclude that many existing two-lane rural highways designed in accordance with the passing side distance requirement in the according to the 2004 AASTO or 2017 TAC geometric design guideline can be used for long combination vehicle. 2-track platooning may be feasible on the two-lane rural highway that meet 2004 AASTO and 2014 and 2017 tag geometric design guideline for passing side distance. But we suggest that providing frequent passing lane on the highway section designated for two-lane rural for 2-track platooning would reduce possible safety concern. We understand, however, that the cost of constructing adequate passing lane may prohibit the operation of track platooning on the two-lane highways. If future V2V technology allows vehicles to overtake safely without the need for a passing lane, the passing side distance requirement estimated in this study may provide a useful insight to determine the minimum distance for communicating between a vehicle wishing to overtake and an oncoming vehicle on the opposing lane. In, in the end, here are the references what I have used for this study. In the end, I would like to acknowledge my gratitude to York University and Smart Freight Center for funding this research project. In addition, I would like to thank CITE and IT York University Student Chapter for arranging lots of training sessions, which helped me to accomplish this research project. Thank you so much. If you guys have any question, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Tanvir. And at this point, I'll open it up for questions. So anybody in the chat or in the questions portal? Okay. While I wait for questions, I will ask that the judges just deliberate. Go ahead and start deliberating, and you can email me the results. But in the meantime, I'll still take questions if anybody want to type in the chat or in the questions portal. And from my end, Tanvir, is there any more that needs to be looked at after this, or is this sort of the conclusion of what you've been involved with in your PhD research, or where are we?
Actually, in this research, we have investigated only the passing side distance, right? But there are several other parameters we may need to investigate in future. For example, recently we have completed a research on the arterial roadways, how the arterial roadway operational performance will be impacted for truck platooning operations. We also have performed another study, that one is on the freeway merging lane segment, like the acceleration lane. whether we need to modify or whether current geometric design standard is sufficient. So through all this study, actually we understand which type of roadway segment should be targeted roadway segment where we can allow track platooning. Because if we want to get the benefit, track platooning cannot be operated only along the freeways only, right? If we want to get the maximum benefit, they need to travel along the other roadway facilities. And if we think about our arterial roadways, just for an example, I could say that the turning radius for the long combination vehicle, since the length is quite similar, but there is a difference in the track platooning and the long combination vehicle. So the area where we cannot allow long combination vehicle, in those areas due to the restricted turning radius, in those areas we can allow track platooning. And also on the other hand, if we see our license requirement and license history for the truck drivers, it's really harder to get the long combination vehicle driving license instead of in comparison to a single unit truck. So if we see all those perspectives, this research actually gives us lots of prospect that open-ended prospect that how we can get benefit actually on which type of roadways we should operate.
All right, thanks, Tanvir. At this point, I'm going to ask if Julia Salvini is still on the line, if she would like to turn on her camera, unmute, and offer some remarks on behalf of the CITE executive.
I'm here. Can you see me?
I can see you. We're hearing a little bit of muffle in the conversation. Not sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me better yet?
Still sounding a bit like a droid.
Well, that's unfortunate.
For the benefit of anyone who has not met Julia Salvini before, this is not how she normally sounds.
Well, thanks. Let me see if I can change microphone.
How is that? Is that better by any chance?
Much better, yes.
My anti-droid microphone. Thanks very much. Well, hello, everybody. It's very strange to be talking to you and not being able to see you, but it's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for the presentations. I didn't catch all of them, but I did catch the last little bit, which has been really interesting. So I appreciate you all taking the effort and putting the time into put these presentations together. Just wanted to bring a few greetings from CITE and to bring to your attention just a few things you should be keeping your eyes open for. So coming up at the end of May, we are, fingers crossed, hoping to be doing our conference in Vancouver in person. It looks like we're going to be able to do that. So we're very, very excited about it. And I hope that many of you will be able to join. Just wanted to highlight a few of the student-centered type things that are going on in relation to the conference. First of all, our awards deadline is coming up. So next week on March the 1st is the deadline for all of our awards, including our student awards. There's a number of them. There was a reminder email that went out just, I'm going to say yesterday, and they're all on our website. And if you're thinking about applying, please do. Our awards come, most of them with a financial contribution, but then also with some travel money for the conference and with free registration for the conference if you're successful in winning any of those awards. So they're well worth applying to. We will be holding a traffic bowl as part of the conference, and I'm not sure which of your schools have talked about putting together teams, but I hope that some of them have. Traffic bowl is always better with lots of teams. So hoping that you are thinking about those things and planning to represent. And then finally, just want to highlight that we are hoping to run a student leadership summit at the same time as the conference, so likely The last few years that we've done it the weekend before the conference. So the welcome reception is on the Sunday night, and the Student Leadership Summit was the Saturday all day and the Sunday morning. They've been really well attended, and the feedback that we get on these Student Leadership Summits has been fantastic. They're typically run by a local student chapter, and they're normally held on campus at a local school. And we bring in speakers to talk about leadership type stuff. So you're going to get a lot of technical stuff out of the conference. This is more about, how do you think about the things that you need to progress your career, and what are some of the things that you should be thinking of beyond the technical stuff? What are the opportunities for you as a new grad? And you'll hear from some new grads as well. So it's always a really great time if you are planning to come to the conference, and we're able to hold the Student Leadership Summit. I hope that you'll consider attending. It's well worth your while. It's very inexpensive. It's run almost entirely off of sponsors. I think the last couple of years we've charged people maybe $25 to $50 to attend each. So it's well worth your while. And with that, Sean, I don't know if you want me to take some questions if anybody has them, or if you're ready.
We can certainly take that time right now. I am ready with the results, but
oh, you are?
If anybody,
excellent.
Yeah, but if anybody has questions, feel free, or forever hold your peace. And then certainly, we all know how to reach Julia. Her information's on the CITE website.
I'm easy to find.
Yes. Unfortunately, we don't have a portal where we can do two-way communication, but
yeah,
certainly if there's questions in the chat or in the question portal. But seeing none, at this point, I'll let you off the hook, and I'm happy to announce the results of the competition. So,
hi, everyone.
Thanks very much, Julia. Yeah. So with that, I would like to announce the winners, first off, of the undergraduate portion. And I want to remind everybody that in this case, everybody walks away with a minimum of $100. So just by coming today and by participating today, you're all walking away with a minimum of $100. So each category, there's a third place winner prize of $100, second place winner of $150, and a first place win of $350. And in the case of the first place winners, there's also the possibility of you being entered into a draw to be selected as the winner nationally, and possibly be given a travel subsidy to the Vancouver conference. So best of luck to everyone involved, and I'm happy to announce the winners. So in third place for the undergraduate category, we have Andres Rodriguez from the University of Waterloo. In second place, Avery DeChef from Western University. And in first place, Dumi Senevarantna from Ryerson University. So congratulations to all three of our participants, and I will be in touch with all of you to ensure that you are mailed your prize money. So congratulations. In the graduate category, in third place, we have Sheila Jamal from McMaster University. In second place, we have Tanvir Chowdhury from York University. And in first place, we have Adonai Garcia from York University. Again, congratulations to all of our winners. So unfortunately, I'm unable to hear any form of applause. This is obviously a little bit more silent compared to previous competitions. So thank you all for participating, both to our participants, especially our judges, again, Eric Nevlin, Omar Shams, and Dana Elfar, for serving as judges and as abstract reviewers for this competition for many years in a row now that they've been participating. Thank you again to Julie Salvini, past president of CITE, and for her remarks on the executive. Thank you to Stephen Garner for facilitating this competition on this online portal. We could not do this without your help. So thank you very much. And thank you to all of you who have attended this competition. Our students are the next generation of our transportation profession, and it is important that they receive all the support they can get from this industry. So thank you for being a community of transportation professionals and supporting these students. We are hopeful, just like the conference in Vancouver this year, we are hopeful that next year we can return to some sort of an in-person based competition next year. Last time we had left this off, it was the Southwestern Ontario section's turn to host. And so we're hoping that they can be afforded the opportunity to host. We had previously committed to the University of Windsor, and so we are potentially hoping that there is an opportunity, now that we've learned what online is able to do, for those who aren't able to commit to travel, whether we can offer some sort of a hybrid environment next time. So stay tuned for more details next year on that. And in the meantime, please continue to pursue other student-based awards before the March 1st deadline, and enjoy your evening. Thank you very much.